Hey, I just wanted to come back on here because I found that because I realized that um, yesterday I was having a conversation and one of my moderators, Adam, who's been my moderator for a long time, and he and we often agree on things and sometimes we don't, which is fine. You guys know here on my channel, we all don't have to agree. Okay. I have people on my channel, I have, for example, MGTOW on my channel. There are people who are actually MGTOW and they are subscribed to this channel, and clearly they won't agree with me on MGTOW. Um, there are white people who are subscribed to my channel, women, men. There are people who are not Christian, even though I'm Christian. So there are a variety of people that are subscribed to this channel, and we don't always agree. But Adam brought up something that I thought was really interesting. He brought up class versus race with regard to poverty, and that the division that we really are suffering from is a class versus a racial issue. And I did talk about it in my live last night. It seems like when I was listening to my live on the playback, because I like to read all your comments and sometimes I don't get to do that in the lives. So, what you guys don't know about me is that I not only read all of the comments that you guys leave on my channel and on my community tab, after every live, I go back through the live and I read the entire chat. And I read everybody's comments. So no comment you make on this page goes unread because I literally read them all. Um, and so as I was listening to the playback and reading everybody's comments, I realized my reception was really shoddy at the beginning of that. And I thought also that the topic deserved like its own separate video. So here we are, um, about to have our own separate um, video. So hold on one second. I'm trying to get my I'm trying to get my device to rotate. Okay, I can't get my device to rotate. So whatever. Hey Cassandra. Hi Frantonio. So in any event, um I want to talk about this because I think it's an important topic. And I definitely want to address it. I wanted to do it in a way where it was the sole topic of conversation. Is the issue a class issue or is the issue a race issue? So, do Black people have the problems that they are having because they are poor and our plight is the same as the plight of all other poor people? Or are we having an issue because there is an actual racial aspect to this thing? Let me see if I can just like turn it around. Okay, that might be better. I wonder why I'm doing this on my phone, you guys, and I'm having like a problem. Okay, anyway. So let's talk about this because I touched on it and I actually did some more research and I'll put some links in the description box. My argument yesterday was that while Black people are not the only poor people on earth, where Black people are present, or those people who could be equated to Black, like the untouchables in India, who literally have Black skin, um, that they are the lowest on the totem pole. And that is the case in all colonized places. And while I acknowledge in places where there are no Black people present, that obviously that's not going to be the rule there. So, for example, yesterday I said in China, the poorest people in China are going to be Chinese people of Asian descent because there are basically almost no black people in China. But interestingly enough, even in China, the poorest people in China are the dark skinned Chinese people because there are dark skinned Chinese people. And so there is a pattern. And interestingly enough, as I was doing my research, I went to the World Bank's website, and the World Bank actually tracks poverty throughout the world. How about that? And I'm going to tell you something that's even more interesting. It's how they track poverty. Okay. How the World Bank tracks poverty is they track poverty based on being of Afro descent or being of indigenous non-Afro descent. Let me say that again. The World Bank tracks poverty by if you are of Afro descent, indigenous non-Afro descent, or other, which really feeds into my argument that the world sees everybody as white except for indigenous people and black people. Okay. And indigenous people often are very brown. All right. A lot of indigenous people are actually black, such as the Fijians, the Australians, the Tasmanians, people like that. So, yes.
This baby needs a pair of scissors to cut out some persons.
Some paper dolls?
Yeah, for me.
Okay, she can have a pair of scissors.
Can we use the kitchen scissors?
She can use those scissors. You cannot use those scissors.
I know that.
You mean yes, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, you guys, that was my little one. Sorry. So, with that said, I just found that very fascinating that the World Bank does this. So that means that white people, Asian people, white Asians, right? All of these, Indian people, all of these groups of people are categorized as one group on these poverty calculators that the World Bank has. But Black people and indigenous people are kept separate. But what is also interesting about these charts, and I'm going to put a link in the description box to the World Bank charts that I'm referencing, but you can also simply go to worldbank.org, I believe it is, the World Bank's website, and you can look these charts up for yourself. So, anything that I say or anything I reference on this channel, you can always vet that for yourself. I never come with, weird information that has, no basis in reality. So, with that said, I just found that so fascinating, especially because this isn't the only place that this happens. This also happens, and I talked about this in my adoption video, in adoption. Interracial adoption is only interracial adoption if the child is Black. Otherwise, it's just regular adoption. So if the child's Asian, it's regular adoption. If the child is Mexican, it's regular adoption. I think obviously Afro Latinos would fall under Black. So it's interesting to me because we don't realize how the world sees us. The World Bank, that's huge. But let's talk about what the data on the chart said. So we've established that the World Bank, when they track poverty globally, they set aside Black people and indigenous non-Afro. So people of African descent and indigenous people who are not of African descent, and then everybody else gets lumped together. They only segregate those two groups. And guess who is highest on the poverty calculator? Black people. In every single country that I looked at, Black people were highest on the poverty calculator. except for in one instance where indigenous were highest on the poverty calculator. But in that country, everybody had about the same amount of money. So there wasn't a great disparity. Um, and you guys can take a look at it yourselves. But in every other case, Black people had gross disparities of poverty. And then under them were the indigenous people. And then at the top of the wealth ladder was everybody else. Every single time, y'all. Every single time. So, what does this have to do with the topic of the video? If that is the case, can we say that class and not race is the problem? If the majority of the poor people per capita, when Black people are present, are Black every time, that might indicate something. Maybe race has something to do with it. And let me take it a step further. Not only would I say that race has something to do with it, I would say that you can look at the cultural climate of countries and how they feel about people with Black skin in those countries. Hey, BMT. And you can tell that there is a racial aspect to this. So let me give some examples. In China, the royal people have brown skin. Their brown skin often is about the color of a mixed person, but it can get rather dark to like my skin color. And it is frowned upon in China to have dark skin. Something else that's interesting is that the one child law in China does not necessarily apply to those people who are rural. However, they are the underclass and they are the poor in China. And their skin color is considered undesirable. In Thailand, lighter skin is preferred, but there are people from Thailand who have darker skin. Surprisingly dark. And those are the poorest people. In India, the untouchables, right, Kenny? In India, the untouchables have skin that is exceptionally Black. Those people are Blacker than most of us, okay? And it is specifically in India, their skin that people don't like. The culture in India hates what they look like. The culture in India has a preference for whiteness. And the poorest people in India are the Black-skinned people. In Australia, the native people there, the Aboriginals, the indigenous people are Black, and they are the poorest people. Now, Sun Ray, who is from Australia, likes to point out that the people who live on indigenous land, even though the whole country, all of Australia is their land, but those indigenous people that live segregated off in the tiny little pockets of land that white people gave them, those indigenous people live off of the land. That's what Sun Ray was saying. But as far as poverty statistics in Australia, it is the Black people that are poor. They are the poorest of the poor per capita. So, in all of these things, I'm talking about per capita. So, the size of the Black population is irrelevant because per capita, they will still be. So, the Black people can be outnumbered, but per capita, Black people will represent the highest part of the poor. The same thing in Fiji. In Fiji, actually, there is a lot of political strife because the Fijians, who are the native people of Fiji, are in abject poverty and highly discriminated against in their own country. In Brazil, which is really a melting pot of people, and has a high mixed race population. The poorest of the poor per capita are the Black people. I could go on and on and on. In African countries that have been highly colonized by Indians and whites, the native Africans are the poorest of all the people. In African countries that have been heavily colonized by East Indians and whites, the native Black populations are pushed to the very bottom of the poverty barrel. In America, Black people make up the smallest part of the population, but per capita, they make up the majority, almost 30% of the people in poverty. And most of our people are in poverty in this country. So, globally, in European countries, in Asian countries, in African countries, in South American countries, in remote islands, the statistics are consistent. If your skin is Black, your population is the poorest when colonization has taken place. Now, does this mean that there are no poor white people? No, that's not what I'm saying. There are poor white people and they suffer too. But if there are poor Black people around, they will be suffering more and they will be in greater poverty per capita. That's all that I'm saying. So, can we say then that this is not a racial, that this doesn't have a racial aspect? When we see this same pattern globally over and over again. And again, this is something I talked about a little bit yesterday, even though yesterday was really about like re-indoctrinate, like correcting indoctrination of our children and reading materials. But for 2 hours, y'all, we were all over the place on that live yesterday. But I felt that Adam brought up a point that a lot of people feel, because I said it's not only Adam, my moderator, who has that opinion. One of my best friends, we literally, he and I cannot talk politics because he gets so angry when he talks to me. So we just have a pact in our friendship to never have certain conversations, right? um so he believes this too, being from San Francisco, and especially being from the Haight. Lots of people that I know believe this, believe that race is not a factor, it is class, and that Black people are not discriminated against because of their Blackness, that poor people, period, are discriminated against, period, across the board. And so when you make an argument that race is problematic and that race is the problem, so for example, uh, when we had the disparity between cocaine and crack, and that affected the Black community the most, the argument was that it wasn't a racist law because it wasn't really that they were targeting Black people, it's that poor people used crack. And because Blacks are overrepresented in the poor community, the Black community was highly impacted by that law. So the law was not racist, the law was classist. This is the argument. But I think it's kind of like the dog chasing its tail. What do you guys think? I feel it's like, oh, abracadabra. Okay. Because are you a flat earther? Okay, I understand. I understand. We can say worldwide. So Cassandra said, how is it not racial when South America, Asia, Europe have Blacks, less mixed, less white, says biracial people? The thing is that, but this is the argument that they'll make. So why do I think it's important that we have this discussion, right? The thing is that our people have a variety of viewpoints, right? And we have to know how to, with love, right? With love, how to get them to see. Okay, so let me put it this way. I could say that people who are in a pool are wet. People who are in a pool are wet. You could say getting in the pool is what makes you wet. Are both things true? Let me repeat that. I might say,
I'm gonna look at my superhero station.
oh, why don't you bring it for me?
I can't. It's made of blocks.
Is it?
Yeah. Wooden blocks.
Really?
Yeah. So come.
I will have to. I'm going to have to probably get a picture of it.
Okay.
Okay. So, whenever I can't go and look at his block creations, I have the kids take pictures of the block creations for me. They're building with blocks. Hey, One Love. So, anyway, I could say people who are in pools are wet. And you could say people who get in pools get wet. Are both things true? I could argue they are true, right? I could argue they are true. Both things are true. And I could say this for this argument. Being in poverty, regardless of color, will have certain social ramifications. That is true. But at the same time, when there is a group of people who all look the same, who are constantly overrepresented in poverty statistics every single time throughout the world, country after country after country, then we cannot say that the color of their skin is irrelevant. You know what I'm saying? Like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. That's a fact. That is a fact. And that's kind of the argument we're having here. So it's more about, do you want to ignore part of the argument? Poverty is an issue. Class is an issue. But it is an issue for some groups of people more than others. And that is what we see represented in every single country on this planet. We see the same dynamic on every continent on this planet. The same exact dynamic. Blacks make up the majority of the poor per capita, and alongside them, indigenous people. Period. There's just no disputing it. That is just the truth of the matter. So then the question becomes, why is that? Why is that? If it's not skin color and it's class, then why are the people with a certain skin color always the ones at the bottom? And that would be what I would ask people who have this belief. I feel like it's not color, it's class argument. I think it makes us feel better. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to feel like people don't like you. And we're always looking for a way to rewrite our narrative. And this is something I was talking about last night. I am for rewriting the Black narrative, right? I don't like our gloom and doom struggle narrative. I hate it. And I agree that we need to rewrite it. Where I diverge from some people is that, hey, Bella LaDonna, Cassandra said, not understanding. However, human beings are similar in nature. It doesn't make it not racist because it's happening in Asia. I agree. I agree. There is a universal hatred toward dark skin. But why? The thing is, we don't want to feel like nobody likes us. I want to rewrite the Black narrative too, but this is my thing. I don't think that we can rewrite the Black narrative by denying the truth. And I think there's a lot of danger in denying the truth. Okay? And this is what I mean. If we say something like it's not race, it's class, then what's going to stop the discrimination against people with dark skin? What's going to stop it? What's going to protect Black people? Because even if all the poor people in the room are Black, it gives the wealthy and the privileged plausible deniability to say, well, they're not suffering because they're Black. They're just poor. Any poor person would suffer like that. The thing is that any poor person isn't heavily represented. Black poor people are overwhelmingly represented. So a lot of times we can come up with narratives that benefit actual racists and allow them to continue to practice racism with anonymity because we refuse to view the behavior as racist in nature. So the same thing comes when I talk about the wealthy. When I talk about the wealthy, I will often reference them as white. And a lot of people will say, well, there are Black wealthy people too. But my thing is, if globally, almost everybody who is wealthy has white skin, so if you are in India, most of the wealthy people will have white skin. Most of the poor people will have Black skin. So I always reference wealthy people as white because that's what I see represented in every country. If you go to China, most of the wealthy people have white skin. Most of the poor people have Black skin. If you come to America, most of the wealthy people have white skin. Most of the poor people have Black skin. So it's really hard for me not to point that out. If all leopards have spots, then how am I at fault for saying, "Oh, look at that, those leopards are always spotty." you know, they always have spots on them. It's like if I have to deny the obvious pattern, there's a pattern. There's a pattern. If I have to pretend like I don't see the pattern for political correctness, or, the argument also is because I'm Christian and I know that color doesn't matter, then all of my argument should come from that standpoint. Well, no, all color doesn't matter to Christians. All right. Color doesn't matter to Christians. The world's not full of Christians. The world is full of racists. So my personal belief has nothing to do with how Black people are going to be positioned in society because I don't run the world. You know what I'm saying? So I also have to be honest and truthful to the real dynamic that is happening. Because what I do is I close the door of dialogue within our community when I deny something that is obvious. And a lot of times, Black people, we spend a lot of time infighting. We spend a lot of time beefing amongst ourselves because some of us want to deny reality. Not just on this subject, but many. Not just on this subject, but many. And not always to the benefit of white people. Sometimes we think our rhetoric benefits Black people, but we go so far off into left field that literally we end up alienating a huge part of the Black community. Just like making the argument that it's not race, it's class alienates a huge part of the Black community that has eyeballs. Anybody with eyeballs can see that race has something to do with this. If it doesn't have anything to do with this, then it's sure doing a good job at looking like it has something to do with it. Do you know what I mean? So Zelix Leo brings up a very good point. He said, probably because no one truly knows why Blacks are poor generally. Oh, you know what? That's a really good point. So the argument, and I'm glad you brought that up, Zelix, because there is another group of people, and there are some Black people. Jesse Lee Peterson would probably be a part of this group. Um, there's a group of people who feel that there's something about the behavior and nature of Black people that keeps us in poverty. And because there's something about the nature of us that keeps us in poverty, it's not racism that is the cause of the overwhelming trend of poverty throughout the world. Rather, it is the fact that there is a flaw in how our people behave that keeps us in poverty. Now, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm going to share my theory on this. I think that there is a flaw in Black people that keeps us in poverty. I do. Does that surprise anybody? I think that Black people have a major flaw that has allowed us to remain in poverty. And I'm going to give a few examples of that flaw in action. Okay? So, Black people are not violent enough. That's why we're in poverty, straight up. And let me give some examples of this. So, in Tasmania, Black people killed sheep, white people killed humans. Follow me? There was a conflict in Tasmania over land. The Tasmanians did not want sheep on their land. Rather than going and killing all the white people, they killed sheep. And white people killed 40 human beings for every one sheep. Now there are no Tasmanians. In America, and this really resonates with me because I'm of Gullah descent, the Gullah people moved into the swamps with the Native Americans and started murdering white people. Most slaves weren't comfortable with doing that. You had random offshoots like Nat Turner and slave revolts here and there, but for the most part, slaves were not willing to just slaughter white people, and white people were willing to be violent toward us. That's how they kept slaves in control, was with violence. That's why Black people are in poverty. Right now in America, white people have all the guns. They run the jails, they run the government, and they acquired that power with violence. Let me give some more examples. In Australia, white people were comfortable with committing violence toward the Aboriginals, stealing their children, raping their women, creating laws until the 70s to literally purposely breed out Aboriginal blood. All the way into the 70s, they did this. Aboriginals weren't comfortable slaughtering white people. In Fiji, the British went over there and took over the Fijian Islands, incarcerated a lot of the Fijians, and the Fijians were not comfortable with committing mass slaughter against white people. But white people were very comfortable being violent toward them. And now it's the Indians, the East Indians, who are in Fiji being violent toward the Fijians. In India, The white Indians are fond of chopping off the legs of the untouchables. They're fond of stealing their land. They're fond of raping their women. This is what they do to the black people in India. The untouchables just don't have the stomach to be equally violent toward their oppressor. That's why they're in poverty. In South Africa, white people were comfortable engaging in violence and coercive force against the black Africans that were there. And the blacks were not comfortable killing them all in their sleep. That's why they stayed in poverty. See, the thing is, white people, they will kill off whole populations of people. Off the Indian coast, when they first discovered the Andaman Islands, the great Andamanese, they fought back against the British. This is just in the past, like, 100 years, right? In the past 50 years, 6 of those tribes were annihilated. It started with the great Andamanese because they fought back. And after white people proved that they were willing to kill every single solitary black person, the rest of the tribe stopped fighting. And now we have a human safari on the Jarawa Island. I'm just saying, that is why black people are in poverty. Because we are not as ruthless and barbaric as our oppressors. We're not willing to do the dirt. They're coming to the fight with guns, and we're coming to the fight with butter knife. And so invoking injustice is easy because we are passive. And when we try to not be passive, we are shamed by other black people for wanting to be violent. But the people in power are violent, right? When Haiti tried to recently oust the puppet president that was put in by Europeans and backed by the United States, the United Nations peacekeeping army went over there and was shooting them in the streets. You know what I mean? If you're not willing to combat that sort of violence with equal or more aggressive violence, you're going to end up poor because you're not going to have any control and they're not going to forgive your behavior. That's why I think black people are poor. I think we have a flaw. I don't know if it's a flaw or a benefit. You know, it's so hard for me. Like, I really teeter on this. I really teeter on this. I'm a Christian, and there's a lot of war in the Bible. Now, as a Christian, when people enact violence against us, we are to be forgiving, right? But God has approved the slaughter of countless people, and the Bible says God never changes. Everybody thinks of God as like this hippie, and God's not a hippie. He's really just the opposite of a hippie, the complete opposite. But in our community, being inhumane is seriously frowned upon. There are things that most of our people would not be willing to do. What happened in Australia, taking children and purposely raping women and breeding out another race, our people could never do something like that. We see small pockets of black people that engage in this behavior. We saw that a lot of people like to bring up the Tutsis and the, who are they, you guys? The Tutsis, and who are the crazy ones? Anyway, A lot of people like to bring up little anecdotal cases like that of Black people engaging in this behavior. But the thing is that on the whole, that's not the behavior. If we were like that on the whole, like just ready to annihilate some people on the whole, then we wouldn't be poor right now. Okay? Slavery would have never happened. Australia would not be having a problem. There'd be no white people there. Fiji would not be having a problem. Brazil would not be having a problem. Haiti would not be having, like, if we were literally all capable of extreme acts of violence, the world would look very different. I think that's why most Black people are poor. Hi, I don't know, fool. So I think that that is to what Zelix said. I think that that's why Black people are poor. Because the reality is, in order to acquire and maintain control on this planet, see, y'all like how for my flat earthers in the room, I stopped calling it a globe. But anyway, um, in order to gain and maintain control on this planet, you need to be comfortable with using an extreme level of coercive force. You need to be comfortable with doing certain things. And overwhelmingly, Black people aren't comfortable engaging in that behavior. And there's another group of people who happen to have a white skin color who are overwhelmingly comfortable engaging in that type of behavior. If you look at every place that has been colonized, it was not colonized with friendship and hugs. Does anybody know of any place that has been colonized that was colonized with friendship and hugs? And everybody's just kumbayaing with the colonizer. Can anybody, like, this is a real question. I'm not trying to be, facetious. Does anybody know of any country that was colonized with like butterfly kisses? That's just not how this thing works. You know what I'm saying? And if you could find one place, I could find you 20 or 50 others for every one that you found where that was not the case. Because even if it could work, it's certainly not how it's happening most of the time. So I think that Zelix brought up a really good point. Oh, nah, Nikki. Cabbage stir fry sounds so good. That sounds so flipping good. New Eric Kang, no, it's not just for ladies. I can't. Everybody's welcome. Zelix, what are you? Zelix, you must be the flipping good commenter. You're bringing up all the good points. So Zelix said, it makes you wonder how Blacks can be comfortable killing themselves. Yes, Zelix, you are the man for this conversation. So let me say this. There is a book, and I've said this. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Black on Black Crime. Black Annihilation in Service of White Domination. Let me say this book title again, because everybody needs to have this book. Black on Black Crime. Black Self-annihilation in Service of White Domination. Oh, that title is everything. Let me say it one more time, y'all, because that title says it all. Black on Black Crime. Black Annihilation in Service of White Domination. Buy that book, because that author had that same question in his mind. Zelix. That author had that same question. I hate Black on Black crime. I understand that people commit crime, against people they are in close proximity to and all that jazz. But I don't agree with that mess. At the end of the day, the same thing that makes white people feel they are superior makes us feel we are inferior. And this is why I want to really focus on what it looks like for us to rewrite the narrative of Blackness for our children. This is why it's so important that we homeschool. It's so important that we turn off the television and disengage from media as much as possible. Because as Black people, for generations upon generations, our interaction with whites looks something like this. White people come in, they oppress us, and they uplift themselves, and they say that things are bad about Blackness. And every instance throughout the world that this happens, every instance throughout the world where we come in contact with each other, that is what happens. And so the first couple generations, right? The generations that are alive for that initial interaction with their oppressor, they just hate white people, okay? Right? But the babies that are born into a world, our children are born into a world where being Black is looked at as something that is not good or is less than. And they spend 24 hours a day immersed in a society that has been fully developed and is fully controlled by people and is founded by people who hate Blackness. Does this mean every white person hates Black people? No. But it doesn't matter if the society was created by white people who do hate Black people. And I really like to pick on Australia because Australia's history of this behavior is very new. What I mean is that Australia just stopped their stealing children and breeding out Aboriginals and having sanctioned legalized discrimination against Black people 50 years ago. And right now, we're seeing what happened in the United States 400 years ago. We're watching that in real time in Australia. And so Australia's dynamic is fascinating to me because we are able to see in real time what it looks like and how the mental insanity affects Black people when this change in dynamic is new. And so I think that Black people hate themselves, right? We don't like super dark skin overwhelmingly because dark skin is bad. I know, and I'm not going to say who it is, I know a Black man, and he and I are about the same color. And every time we're together, he has made this comment a lot of times, and it makes me uncomfortable. He says that I'm darker than him. Now, I don't mind being darker than somebody. The part that makes me uncomfortable is, why do you keep bringing this up? You are literally the same color as me. Why are you so fixated on like whether or not we might be a couple shades different? But it's very important to him. So I wasn't surprised when he told me that his child had a desire to be lighter. Interesting stuff. And I think that we engage in violence toward each other because we are raised in a society where violence toward Blackness is appropriate and accepted, maybe even encouraged. Cynthia G did an interesting video on a Help Me Feel Good doll. And it was a little Black doll with basically multicolored dreads. And you were supposed to beat up the doll to help yourself feel better. You know what I'm saying? Also, everything about Blackness is negative, right? Everything about us is a struggle, overcoming. You know what I mean? We don't get a chance just to be people. We don't get a chance just to be great. If we're great, we overcame the odds. You know what I'm saying? Gifted Hands wasn't about an amazing surgeon, it was about a little black kid who made it out of the hood. If you guys don't know what Gifted Hands is, it's a book. Hold on, let me look at your comments. I'm sorry. Yeah, Fiji is stunning. It really, really is. Did I say hi to, yeah, I did. I said hi to Belladonna. Hold on. Let me get back. I want to see what you guys are saying in the chat because I literally was like on a rant and I wasn't. The South Africans aren't doing as much as they could be doing. I agree, Zelix. We are as ruthless, but not to them, to each other. And that's a problem. We often direct our hatred inward. And that's why I think you guys should really get that book, Black on Black Crime, Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. You know what I mean? Get that book because I think it's a question we don't have often. And while we could, vet this out amongst each other, I think the author of that book articulated the mindset pretty easily. And it's sort of like the woman whose husband beats her and she abuses the kids. You know what I mean? We feel powerless to push back against the system. And we've already been told to not like ourselves. And so our rage ends up being directed at each other. The one thing Black people really excel at, and I flipping hate it, is we excel at tearing each other down. If we can't do anything else, what we will do is tear each other to shreds. That's what we will do. I have received more abuse from Black people than white. It's just the truth of it. Like in my face abuse. Why is that? You know what I'm saying? Why is that? You guys know that I have a scar on my neck. It was a Black man that tried to murder me. Just plunged a knife into my neck. How many Black people is that the story for? We have to look at those things because we excel at engaging in vitriol. We excel at calling each other names, judging each other. Oh, we are experts at judging each other. But try to judge somebody who's not Black. You'll get drugged from here to kingdom come. You know? You will be judged from here to kingdom come. Hi, India. Snuggle 668 said, "That's a lie because Black people enjoy being violent. They are violent to themselves indiscriminately. I want you to look at the crimes Blacks commit on each other knowing their situation." I think I spoke to that. Thank you, Stephen. It was so good. You'll be able to eat it when you get home. Nah, Nikki. Because that sounded good. Bella LaDonna brings up a good point. The Black people engaging in shootings is not the majority of us. Thank you, Belladonna. That is true. That is an element of the community. White people, however, are overwhelmingly this way. That is the difference. And I agree with that. That is true. To act like the majority of Black people engage in violence, I think, is being disingenuous. We do engage in violence toward each other. It's not always physical. Sometimes it is verbal, right? Sometimes it is emotional. But we definitely do not engage in violence toward each other to the level of it being the majority of us. There's a very aggressive minority. But even the idea that we view each other through the lens of the worst of us is interesting to me. Like it's just some food for thought, right? We're sitting here and as we're talking to each other, like all of these things are coming up. Why do we view each other through the lens of the worst of us? But we've been taught to do that, have we not? Have we not been taught as Black people to view the worst, the most downtrodden, the most disturbed of Black people as a representation of all of us? And so Belladonna is right. The Black people that are engaging in these behaviors are not the majority of us. That is a good point. Cassandra said, I do think racism is natural because humans adapt to their environment, but we don't have to be passive because it's natural. Cassandra, I don't really think racism is natural. Like I feel like if a person who was truly racially neutral, right? Raised a bunch of babies, Black babies, white babies, just a group of babies that were different together, I don't think that the babies would think anything of it. I don't think like I think that adults ruin children. That's what I think. I think adult human beings ruin babies. We ruin them. We teach them our crappy ways, and then we say that it's natural. I think, that's the thing. I think some things are natural, lying, gluttony, you know, some things are natural. I don't think racism is natural, though. I don't think little kids care. I think they find skin color interesting, but I don't think they like or dislike it. I think they just find it fascinating. I think they notice it because you can't help but notice if somebody's a different color than you or if somebody's a girl or a boy. But I don't think they have a bias naturally. Yeah, Zelix, it is a good read. India said, we have to rebuild starting with self first and then our families first. I completely agree. I completely agree. Actually, India XOXO, my daughter's rooms are on their own floor of our house because it's 3 stories. Or the place that I have now is actually like technically they call them condos, but like it's really more like a townhome, like a 3-story townhome. And the password to get on their floor, wait, hold on. Wait a second. Hold on, you guys. You guys won't believe me if I tell you. So hold on, I'm gonna call my girls. Elizabeth, come here, baby. Okay, watch this, you guys. I'm gonna tell you how real this life is around here. Can you tell me what is? Come over here, because I'm doing a live. Come over here. Come close. All right. So, what is the password to get onto your floor of the house?
Black is beautiful, you are queen.
Say it again.
Black is beautiful, you are queen.
Okay, that's all I wanted. So, so my point is because India said black is beautiful, and that made me think of my little girl's password. So the password to get onto their level of the house is black is beautiful, you're a queen. Which is just so sweet, y'all. But anyway, that ties into, what the sister was saying about we have to improve ourselves and then improve our children. Oh, you found it, Zelix? Dope. I'm glad you found it. You guys can tell I'm hecka far back in the comments, but I'm catching up. So, Zelix, can I make you a mod and then you could put it in the, oh man, I don't know how to do anything from here. So I won't be making mods right now. Okay. So, I think that definitely, no, you can't post web links in here, Naniki. I would have to mod you guys. And I don't know doing a live, because normally I do my lives from my Mac. and I'm doing this live from my phone, and I don't know how to put make mods so that you guys can post links. So I'm sorry to mod y'all up next time. Um, so yes, I agree. You have to start with the work on yourself, and then you do that in your home. Um, and so yeah, I agree with that. I think she's really on point with that. Bella Ladonna said that she's never attacked a black person, but I remember getting attacked and having the scars to prove it. That is definitely the case. Like, that is so, so very true. That's so very true. Irene, if you grew up around black people for most of your life, of course you're going to experience more harm by black people. I agree with that, Rosie. So, like I said, I can get with the proximity argument. I can get with the proximity argument, right? But outside of the proximity argument, we really do have more aggression toward each other. You know what I mean? That we really do. So I think it's both things can be true. It's not really all one thing or all another thing. We have more exposure to each other, so we will have more opportunity to be hurt by each other. But I also think we are more aggressive toward each other. And we are more passive when dealing with whites. I think that is true too. Like both things are are true. Lorraine S does not agree with me. She says racism is definitely not natural, but Lorraine is like rolling her eyes. She's like, no, that mess is natural. So Lorraine does not agree with that point. She's like, that is some BS. Racism is completely natural. We might have to have that conversation one day, Lorraine. Like, is racism natural? Is that some stuff like void of any influence, that we would automatically have? Or mostly that whites would automatically have, because black people are not heavily racist. Um, every generation wants to continue their legacy. Rosie said, "Why do people think the only difference between two races is skin color?" Um, I don't know why people think that, but this is what I will also say. I mean, there are differences amongst black people, right? Culture is one thing, skin color is one thing, culture is another. Skin color is one thing, culture is another. Snuggle, what are you talking about? What password? What password are you talking about? It's not a real password. It's the password to their floor. Like, one of them will block your way and say, "What's the password?" It's not like a literal password to a computer or anything like that. Um, I've never experienced problems just walking through a black neighborhood. Just like walking through a black neighborhood, I've never had any problem. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Me personally, I'm responding to Snuggle 668 that said, "Where are the good black neighborhoods that everybody is proud of and safe?" I've never had an issue just walking through a black neighborhood like that. So, yeah, there's that. Oh, you have a delay, Lorraine? Okay. Okay, that's cool. I need to make a live about good black neighborhoods to move to. Yes, you do, Snuggle 668. Make that live. Because sometimes we buy into the narrative that everywhere black people live, it's just completely crime ridden. And that's just not the case. A neighborhood doesn't even have to be a wealthy neighborhood to be a good, safe neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? When I would go to the Midwest to visit my family, we didn't live in a rich neighborhood. My family members didn't live in a rich neighborhood. They lived in a predominantly black neighborhood. And same thing with my Gullah family, in the low country. Those neighborhoods are not rich, but they're very safe. They're very safe. We could play outside ride our bikes, be outside all day long, bike over to my uncle's store, and never were harmed, never had a problem, ever. And these weren't rich neighborhoods. So, what is good, doesn't necessarily mean that there's money there per se. Patrice Wolfe said racism is natural for white people. They are inherently evil. Ooh, Patrice. Are they? Because when we make comments like that, then you know what that means, right? Is that even a child or a baby that would be white would be a person that we could not, we would have to deal with. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they would carry the cancer in them. So that's a strong, that's like a really strong statement. You guys hear my eBay? My eBay is going off. I love eBay. Okay, let's see. Back. Your black son to those neighborhoods and experience will be different. Oh, more said send my black son through those neighborhoods and the experience would be different. Would it? I mean, I guess maybe it would be different. You know what I'm saying? Maybe. Oh, Lorraine said, who said that shit? Every damn black neighborhood is good. What the fuck of fucks? Okay. Do not trigger Lorraine. Okay. That's what you aren't going to do. Okay, let's see. Older, stable black areas. Yes. I mean, let me put it this way. In San Francisco, a lot of older people that I know, so like my great grandparents lived by San Francisco University. That's where they own their property. And some of their children own property over there. But I also have family that live over in Hunters Point, which is considered to be a poor area of San Francisco. But they are homeowners. And I've never had a problem over in Hunters Point. I've never had a problem over there. So, yeah, I've never had a problem over there. Me personally. So with that said, um, yeah, I'm not gonna stay on here forever because we've been up here like about an hour, but I definitely wanted to just come back and just have a dedicated live just on that particular topic. Is it racism or is it or is it something to do with classism? And I think that it's important that we have these conversations and we are not dismissive of Black people who make that argument, but that we really learn to combat that argument with facts, right? With facts. And that both things can be true. Classism is a problem, and classism can affect people of any color. However, when Black people are present, they are overrepresented and continuously at the bottom of the barrel of the class structure. And this is universal throughout every single continent and country. And so we cannot ignore that, right? We cannot ignore that. That does not mean that other people are not poor. That does not mean that other people do not suffer. What it means is that if there is a Black population there, they will be more poor and they will suffer more. And we went through earlier all of the countries where that is the case. And the thing is, I dare somebody to show me a country where the Black people that are there are not. Like, find a country that has been colonized or that has a population of Black people and show me a country where they are not overrepresented in the group of poor. I challenge anybody to do that. And also, I'll try to remember to put the link to the World Bank statistics on there. Remember, even the World Bank acknowledges this because when they do poverty statistics for the World Bank separates people of Afro descent, indigenous, non Afro descent, and then everybody else. And on even the World Bank's charts, Black people, except for in one case, in a country where the poverty gap was very small and everybody had about the same amount of money, in every other case, Black people were the most poor. And I just dare anybody to present data to the different. And like I said, if you could present one place where Blacks are not overrepresented as poor people when there are white, non Black populations present, I can present 50 places where that is not the case because the norm is the norm, right? And so we cannot ignore that. And then, we also talked about why it is that Black people might be poor. Is there something wrong with us? Are we lazy? Are we screwing up in some kind of way? Is that why all over the earth, Black people are the most poor? And you guys know my theory. My theory is that we are not aggressive enough to usurp authority and take control and be the people that hold the resources and the power. You need to be willing to fight to attain resources and to attain power and to attain land. That is how you acquire it. We are taught at the peon level, right? At the peon level, we are taught that you acquire resources and land and power by playing in the political structure. But notice that the wealthy do not acquire resources and land and power through fair play. Governments and the wealthy acquire resources, land, and power with violence. That is how they acquire it. How did the whites get Australia? With violence. How did the whites get the Americas? With violence. How did the whites take control of South Africa? With violence. So Black people will always be at the bottom of the barrel unless they're willing to do the very thing that people at the top of the pyramid are doing, which is engaging in violent act to acquire a large land mass, subjecting the people that are currently on that land, subjugating them and subjecting them to violence and abuse, and then building a political system and a social structure that uplifts Blackness as superior. That is the model that has been used by the current power structure. And so until we're willing to match that energy, we will remain in abject poverty worldwide. That's what's going to happen. No, it's okay, Lorraine. It's okay. You were triggered. Thank you, India. So that is just, that's food for thought for all of us, right? Taylor, that's exactly right. Taylor said the criminals make laws for you not to break so you don't overthrow them as the new law. Straight up, that is exactly what laws are designed to do. They structure society to keep us from engaging in the very behavior that got them power. That's real talk. That's exactly what laws are designed to do. Yeah, I mean, Black people don't need to be active in violence, rather, defensive violence is where we need to improve. I agree with that. I agree with that. I will agree with that. I can roll with that because the end result's going to be the same, right? We're attacked enough where we don't have to attack first. Like it's going to be what it's going to be, right? But I do think that, and we don't, I mean, if we're never violent, it is what it is. I'm just saying that um, at the end of the day, that's why we're positioned where we're positioned, is because the people, the wealthy, right? The people in power, they are willing to engage in behaviors that we are not willing to engage in because we are peons. And I don't say that to insult us, but a peon is a person that has no power. And we spend our entire childhoods going to schools that indoctrinate our minds. And so behaving in certain ways is beyond our comprehension. And so we don't engage in certain behaviors because we feel they are inappropriate. And in that regard, it just kind of is what it is. Do you know what I mean? But we have to recognize that that is why our positionality is not going to change in mass. It might change for one individual, it might change for a small handful of us, but collectively and globally, we are not, and flat earthers don't get triggered. Collectively, we're not going to see that progress unless we are willing to match the energy of the people that we're, because remember, with our progression comes an exchange of resources and power, right? So as we progress, that means that that's coming from somewhere. That means somebody else has to digress with our progression. And so there's going to be a wall that we're going to hit at some point. And when you hit that wall, that's when coercive force is going to become really relevant. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you're going to hit a glass ceiling and you're going to have to break through it to collectively gain any sort of significant resources or power. And the thing is that I don't know that we will collectively chip through that ceiling together. That's something I guess we all have. That's something we're all going to have to think about, you know, if we are if we're willing to do that. Taylor said it's better to be preventative or reactive. Is it better to be preventative or reactive? Man. Oh, that's so funny. Lorraine said, "So why am I listening while in the bank?" And when Irene said white people, the Asian woman in front of me spun around hella quick to looked at me and then capped it off by the black thumbs up on my shirt. I'm like, I can't. I cannot. I cannot do it. Rob, you're correct. Rob said blacks ruled the world before too, and history will repeat itself again by 2040. Every regime comes to an end. I don't know when or if it's going to repeat itself, but I do agree that empires fall. So this is not a permanent situation as it stands. Is it better to be proactive or reactive? I think you have to be both, right? You have to be prepared and you have to be ready to react. I think both things can be true. A lot of times and I notice this like when I have conversations, it's good to be in a room with like so many people because I notice that we're like, is it this or is it that? That's our thinking a lot of the time. Is it this way or is it that way? Should it be this way or should it be that way? And what I find is that most of the time it's both. You know what I mean? It's a little piece of both that we need. I think we need to be prepared and be if you are proactive, you will be capable of reacting in a way that is not instinctual but is planned and calculated. You know what I mean? Like, I think both things can be true. Both things can be true. But anyway, yeah, Darren put it quite well. Preparing to react is being proactive. That's truth. So I think that it definitely goes both ways. Snuggle668 said the same thing. Preparing means you are just getting ready to react. Preparing does not mean you are not going to react. Agree. I agree with that. So anyway, with that said, y'all, I'm gonna get out of here. And yeah, I just wanted to come back because I thought Adam, brought up a good point yesterday. And I'm sorry that my reception was so choppy. Hopefully my reception is not choppy today. Because when I'm reading the chat, it seems like you guys are hearing everything. But you guys know, like I said, I go back after these lives because when you guys write, I read every single thing. And so when I have time after we do lives, I go back and I listen to the live as I'm reading everybody's comments because I don't see everybody's comments during the live. Um, and I just go back and I read everybody's comments. So every time you type something on my channel, it's rare that I don't read it. I read everything y'all type. I really, really do. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to get out of here. I don't know what you're saying has to do with anything, Antoine. But okay. But anyway, y'all. Good night. Good night. What am I saying? Have a good day. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit later. Bye.